Welcome to today's show. My name is John. As always, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcast, formerly known as iTunes, or follow the links to social media in the podcast show notes. So please subscribe when you're finished listening. You can go to snarkymoviereviews.com to read notes, bios, and other random movie thoughts. Today's movie is Miracle on 34th Street, 1947. This movie is for true believers, and if you're a true believer, it will be hard to throw too much snark at this one. But I will endeavor to persevere. It's a Josie Wales reference. IMDb.com rates this movie at 7.9. I thought it would be higher. Rotten Tomatoes has it at 96%. It's not in the American Film Institute's Top 100 Films list. It is 9th on the AFI's 100 Most Inspiring Films of All Times. I thought it'd be higher. This is Thelma Ritter's film debut. She had a small role as a harried shopper, but it launched her career in the movies. Valentine Davies got the idea for the story while struggling during a shopping trip. There are a lot of show veterans today, so let's get going. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
Maureen O'Hara played the jaded New York divorcee. The great fiery actress Maureen O'Hara was first covered in Episode 3, McClintock, 1963. John Payne, it's really hard not to say John Wayne. John Payne played lawyer Fred Gailey. Payne was covered in Episode 38, 99 River Street, 1953. The young Natalie Wood played Susan Walker. Wood was first covered in Episode 108, The Searchers, 1956. Porter Hall played a real stinker as store psychologist Granville Sawyer. Hall was first covered in Episode 89, Ace in the Hole, 1951. Jerome Cowan played D.A. Thomas Mara. Cowan was first covered in Episode 100, The Maltese Falcon, 1941. Percy Helton was the drunken parade Santa. Helton was briefly covered in Episode 113, The Setup, 1949. Jack Albertson played the role of a mail sorter with a big idea. Albertson was covered in Episode 134, The Harder They Fall, 1956. Thelma Ritter played the role of a shopper. Ritter was covered in Episode 30, Birdman of Alcatraz, 1962. Edwin Gwynn played the big man, Kris Kringle himself. Gwynn was born in England in 1877. While attending university in England, Gwynn became interested in theater. Gwynn's father, who was a civil servant, threw the young man out of the house when the younger announced that he wanted to work in theater. In 1895, at the age of 18, the broke young man got his first theater work. He spent more than a decade working in stock and traveling companies. Gwynn married, separated, traveled abroad, all before his career improved. By 1908, he was a major actor. Gwynn was drafted into the British Army during World War I. While he was still in the Army, he made his first film. Following the war, Gwynn returned to the stage. He also worked occasionally in the U.S. and continued in English films. Gwynn acted in the silent film The Skin Game, 1921, and reprised his role as Hornblower in The Skin Game, 1931, this time directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Gwynn began working for RKO in 1938 and made a string of successful movies. These include Sylvia Scarlett, 1935, Anthony Adverse, 1936, A Yank at Oxford, 1938, Pride and Prejudice, 1940, No Zombies, An Assassin in the Hitchcock-directed Foreign Correspondent, 1940, One Night in Lisbon, 1941, The Devil and Mrs. Jones, 1941, not to be confused with The Devil in Mrs. Jones, 1973, which is a porno and is widely regarded as helping to usher in the golden age of porno. Scotland Yard, 1941, Charlie's Aunt, 1941, where he's in drag romancing Jack Benny's character, A Yank at Eton, 1942, The Meanest Man in the World, 1943, which may be where my father got that story about the tombstone, Lassie Come Home, 1943, The Keys of the Kingdom, 1944, Dangerous Partners, 1945, Bewitched, 1945, about a woman with split personalities, Of Human Bondage, 1946, Insert Joke, Green Dolphin Street, 1947, and Thunder in the Valley, 1947, where he played a dog-killing SOB. Then, Gwynn got the role as Santa Claus in Miracle on 34th Street, 1947. For this role, he won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar. Amazingly, the 71-year-old gained about 30 pounds for this role. Movies that followed his best-known film include Challenge to Lassie 1949, Louisa 1950, Mr. 880 1950, where he played a very friendly counterfeiter, Sally and St. Anne 1952, Bozo Goes to College 1952 as the football coach without the Gipper, Mr. Scoutmaster 1953 with the oddly cast Clifton Webb as the lead, Them 1954 where he battled giant ants for dominion of the planet, It's a Dog's Life 1955, The Trouble with Harry 1955, which was Glenn's fourth film with director Alfred Hitchcock, and Gwen's last feature film, The Rocket from Calabuch 1956, where he played an atomic scientist trying to get away from it all. Gwen died at the age of 81 in 1959. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
A kindly old man with a beard, Edmund Gwynn, is walking down a New York street. He stops to explain to a store worker that he has the reindeer in the wrong positions in the window display, and we know he is Santa. A newspaper shows that Santa Claus will be in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade at 10 a.m. Doris Walker, Maureen O'Hara, is working hard to organize the parade. When the real Santa gets to the parade, he sees the parade Santa, Percy Helton, is drunk as a skunk. Santa goes to Doris to complain about the drunk. She already thinks he's the real Santa. Doris asks if he's had any experience as Santa, and he says a little. She convinces him to take the job. Santa is a big hit as Santa. Edmund Gwynn played the Santa in the 46 parade so they could get all of the exterior shots they needed. Her work done for the year, Doris goes to her apartment and looks for her daughter, Susan, Natalie Wood. She is with a neighbor, Fred Gailey, John Payne. They are in his apartment watching the parade from the window. Susan is completely jaded with no faith in anything or anyone. Susan reflects the same view as her mother. The Legion of Decency gave this film a B rating because Doris was divorced. Doris comes in and meets Fred. Fred admits to being kind to Susan so he could meet Doris. Susan doesn't believe in Santa. Susan invites Fred to Thanksgiving dinner and then rats him out that it was his idea. Doris gets a call from co-worker Julian Shellhammer, Philip Tong, saying he wants to hire Santa as Santa. She agrees and Santa takes the job. On Santa's first day, he meets kindly Alfred, Alvin Greenman, who plays Santa at the local YMCA. Julian gives Santa instructions on how to be a good Santa. On the job, of course, he is great. A boy wants a toy that no one has. His mother, Thelma Ritter, tries to signal Santa. Afterwards, he tells her where she can buy the toy in another store.
I want to find in this life the big one. Tony Spoiler has rules that control it, what and I won't do it in the house. I'll only do it in the backyard. I promise.
Macy's ain't got me. Nobody's got me.
Well, Peter, I can tell you're a good boy. You'll get your fire engine.
You see? I told you he'd get me one.
That's fine. That's just dandy. Listen, you wait over there. Mama wants to thank Santa Claus, too. What's the matter with you? Don't you understand English? I tell you, Macy's ain't got me. Nobody's got me. I've been all over. My feet are killing me. Fine thing, promising the kid.
Now, you don't think I would have said that unless I was sure, do you? You can get those fire engines at Schoenfeld's on Lexington Avenue. Only $8.50, a wonderful bargain.
Schoenfeld's? I don't get it.
Oh, I keep track of the toy market pretty closely. Does that surprise you, sir?
Shellhammer hears Santa send a customer to Gimbel's. The mother comes back and congratulates Shellhammer on the plan of putting Christmas ahead of commercialism. Interestingly, both Macy's and Gimbel's had final approval over the finished film, and they both accepted the first cut. Could this happen now? I think the store lawyers would tie it up until doomsday. Fred brings Susan to meet Santa. She thinks it's a waste of time. He introduces himself as Kris Kringle, and from here on out I will refer to him as Chris or Santa as appropriate. Susan says that her mother hired him and she knows he's not real.
Well, young lady, what's your name?
Susan Walker, what's yours?
Mine? Kris Kringle. I'm Santa Claus. Oh, you don't believe that, do you?
Mm-mm. You see, my mother's Mrs. Walker, the lady who hired you.
She wants to pull his beard and she is shocked that it is real. Actually, it was a fake beard, just a good one. Susan doesn't ask for anything. Doris gets a little pissy with Fred for taking her daughter to see Chris/Santa. A little Dutch orphan girl comes to see Santa. She's been living in an orphanage ever since those damn Nazis messed up Europe. Chris can speak to her in Dutch.
I'm sorry she doesn't speak English. She's Dutch. She just came over. She's been living in an orphan's home in Rotterdam ever since. We've adopted her. I told her you wouldn't be able to speak to her, but when she saw you in the parade yesterday, she said you were Santa Claus, as she calls you, and you could talk to her. Well, I didn't know what to do.
Hallo, ik ben blij dat je gekomen bent.
Oh, u bent Sinterklaas.
Jazeker.
Beste Bel.
When Susan sees the interaction, her shell begins to crack. Dang, little Natalie could act. Doris calls Chris to her office to explain to Susan that he is not the, quote, real Santa. Chris says that Santa is real and he is the dude. She calls for his employee's card. He lists his name as Chris Kringle, but the address is the Brooks Memorial Home for the Aged. His age is listed as old as his tongue, but younger than his teeth. Finally, the 8 reindeer are listed as his next of kin. He must have gotten rid of Mrs. Claus or Kringle, or maybe he has a couple of families. Anyway, among the reindeer names are Donder and Blitzen, which is correct. This is my pet peeve. There is no Donner. Donder and Blitzen mean thunder and lightning. As in Blitzkrieg or Lightning War, when those damn Nazis were messing up Europe, or shock and awe when others do the same thing. Doris fires Chris because she thinks he's crazy. About that time, she is called to Mr. Macy's office. The policy of Santa sending people to other stores is amazing and working great. She has to get Chris back. Her and Shellhammer decide they will have him examined by psychologist Granville Sawyer, Porter Hall, to see if he's really crazy or just a little crazy like some of those men in Washington.
He's crazy. He thinks he is Santa Claus.
Why, I don't care if he thinks he's the Easter Bunny. You've got to get him back.
He's insane, I tell you. We'll just have to hire somebody else and have him do the same thing.
No, you heard what Mr. Macy said. We've got to keep him.
But what if he should have a sudden fit or something? Oh, no, I've got to tell Mr. Macy.
But maybe he's only a little crazy, like painters or composers or some of those men in Washington.
Doris rehires Chris and tells him he'll have to have a mental exam. He's not worried. Doris calls the Brooks Memorial Home for the Aged and asks to speak to the doctor in charge. In the morning, Chris meets with Sawyer, who has a nervous habit of pulling his eyebrows. Chris knows all of the answers and turns the table on Sawyer for pulling his eyebrows and biting his fingernails.
You're rather nervous, aren't you, Mr. Sawyer? Do you get enough sleep? My personal habits are no concern to you. Oh, I'm sorry. It's just that I hate to see someone tied up. How many fingers do you see? 3. Oh, you bite your nails, too.
Sawyer calls Doris, and his secretary has the same eyebrow-pulling habit. The doctor from the home and Shellhammer are in Doris's office when Sawyer comes in. He wants Chris committed. The doctor from the home says Chris is not harmful to anyone. He suggests that Chris get a roommate. Shellhammer plans to get his wife drunk before he asks if Chris can stay. Chris goes home with Doris and spends some time with Susan. He tries to teach Susan how to use her imagination and play games. Fred offers to let Chris stay with him. This guy seems too nice to be a lawyer. The now drunk Mrs. Shellhammer calls Doris, but the problem is already solved. Doris is shocked when she finds out Chris is staying with Fred. Chris gets Susan to admit that she really wants a home with a yard and a tree for a swing. He says he will do his best. That night, Chris cogitates on how to get the house. Chris already has a plan. He sleeps with his whiskers out because the cold air makes them grow. Macy's puts together a shopping guide to other stores for their customers. Gimbel wants to know why his people didn't think of this stunt. They decide to do the same thing at Gimbel's. Both stores expand the policy to all of their stores. Gimbel and Macy meet and are photographed with Chris. Macy gives Chris a check and Chris says he wants to buy an x-ray machine for his friend. Gimbel agrees to pay the rest of the cost. Later, Chris is eating in the cafeteria with Alfred. Alfred is sad because Sawyer has told him that wanting to play Santa Claus is bad. He says Santa Claus types have a guilt complex they are trying to make up for. Sawyer has Alfred all confused. Chris goes to Sawyer's office and starts chewing him out. Then Chris raps Sawyer on the head with an umbrella. Sawyer makes a federal case out of the incident. He says the attack was unprovoked after he merely mentioned Santa. They trick Chris into leaving the store, even though he has a meeting scheduled with Mr. Macy to report Sawyer. They get Chris in the car and Sawyer jumps in and they all tell the driver to go to Bellevue Mental Hospital. Fred is working at his law office and gets a call that Chris is in Bellevue. The doctor there tells him that he is recommending commitment. Fred hurries down there and finds Chris sitting sullenly after having intentionally failed the evaluation. He can't believe Doris is not coming around, and at first he believes she was part of the confinement. Fred convinces Chris that he should go back to work. However, he can't get out. Fred agrees to represent Chris in the fight against the legal system. Macy reads the riot act to Sawyer and demands he get the mental case dropped against Chris. Judge Henry X. Harper, Gene Lockhart, reads the file with the DA, Thomas Mara, Jerome Cowan, who is made to resemble physically and with character details former Manhattan DA, former governor of New York, and twice failed Republican presidential candidate Thomas E. Dewey. It's no surprise that they have a Republican trying to lock up Santa. Just before the judge signs the commitment papers, Fred comes in and asks for a hearing where he can bring witnesses. Sawyer's waiting outside and wants the charges dropped, but it's too late. Sawyer then tries to pay off Fred to keep the case quiet, and Fred decides publicity is what they need. He gets the newspapers to cover the story. Judge Harper's political advisor, Charlie Halloran, William Frawley, advises him to get off the case. The judge says no one will blame him for doing his job. Then his grandkids refuse to hug him. The DA calls Chris to the stand, and they think the case will be shut and dry. Fred says his client will answer any questions. Chris is charming and says he is Santa Claus.
What is your name? Chris Kringle. Where do you live? That's what this hearing will decide.
The DA rests his case. Fred's case is based on the fact that Chris is Santa and is thus sane. Fred comes in and kisses Doris on the cheek, saying, "Hello, darling." Wait, what? When did this happen? Fred has quit his job over the case. Doris doesn't believe in Chris. The pair have a huge fight. At home, the DA is worried about how badly he is being treated in the papers. Even his wife is against him. Alfred comes down to the court to support Chris. Fred calls Macy. Macy, when asked if Chris is really Santa Claus, sees headlines for either answers. He decides to go with, "I do." Macy, following his testimony, fires Sawyer.
Psychologist. Where'd you graduate from? A correspondence school? You're fired.
The judge is asked to rule on whether there is or is not a Santa Claus. Halloran explains to the judge the effect of ruling that there is no Santa Claus because he will destroy the economy. Judge Harper rules that he will keep an open mind and not rule either way. Fred calls the district attorney's son to the stand. Man, that's low. The boy says he believes in Santa and that Santa is sitting at the defense table. He also says his daddy told him about Santa and would never lie. The DA stipulates that Santa exists. The court then asks for non-opinion-based testimony. Fred gets a continuance until the morning. Susan writes Chris a letter saying she believes, and Doris signs it saying she believes too. Doris drops the letter in the U.S. mail. At the post office, the mail is being sorted by a worker, Jack Albertson. He finds a letter addressed to Santa Claus at the federal court building. The worker gets the idea to deliver all of the Santa mail to the courthouse. On Christmas Eve, at the courthouse, Santa reads Susan's letter and is happy again. Fred is at a loss because he doesn't have anyone to testify for Chris. A bailiff gets Fred and takes him outside. The DA begins to argue for the submission. Fred reads about the post office and its history, an idea created by the smartest American ever, Benjamin Franklin. It was removed as a cabinet-level department in 1972. The DA stipulates that the post office is a federal agency and that it is unlawful to deliver mail to the wrong person. Fred gives the judge 3 letters addressed to Santa Claus and said postal employees delivered the letters to Chris. The DA objects to the 3 letters.
I have here 3 letters. They're addressed simply Santa Claus. No other address whatsoever. Yet these letters have just now been delivered to Mr. Kringle by bona fide employees of the post office. I offer them as positive proof.
3 letters, Your Honor, are hardly positive proof. I understand the post office receives thousands of these letters every year.
I have further exhibits, Your Honor, but I hesitate to produce them.
Oh, I'm sure we'll be very happy to see them.
Yes. Produce them, Mr. Gailey. Put them here on my desk.
Fred says he has more, and the judge orders them put on the desk. Bailiffs then come in with dozens of bags of letters and bury the judge. Judge Harper rules that the court will not override the federal government and the case is dismissed. The DA runs out to get a present for his son. The judge slides 2 letters from his grandkids into the pile. Chris meets with Doris and invites her to a Christmas Day celebration at the Brooks Memorial Home for the Aged. She accepts and invites him to dinner. Chris says not this night. In the morning, Doris and Susan go to the house. Alfred is working as a Santa and meets Mr. Macy. The Brooks home doctor is happy with his new x-ray machine. Susan is sad because what she asked for is not under the tree.
Not the one Mr. Kringle was going to get for me.
What was that?
It doesn't matter. I didn't get it. I knew it wouldn't be here, but I thought there'd be a letter or something telling me.
I don't suppose you even want to talk to me.
Something about a present.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry, Susie. I tried my best, but...
You couldn't get it because you're not Santa Claus, that's why. You're just a nice old man with whiskers.
Santa says he tried his best. Susan says he is not Santa and just a nice old man. Doris says she must believe. Later, Fred comes in and asks to drive Susan and Doris home. Chris gives them a quicker route home. As they drive, Susan, who is now saying she believes over and over, sees the house she asked for with a for sale sign. She runs to the back to see the swing. Fred is overcome and the pair kiss. They decide to buy the house and get married. Fred starts saying he is the world's greatest lawyer because he took a little old man and proved to the world that he is Santa when he sees Chris's walking cane in the corner by the fireplace. Doris sees it and says, "Oh no, it can't be."
The sign outside said it's for sale. We can't let her down.
I never really doubted you. It was just my silly common sense.
It even makes sense to believe in me now. I must be a pretty good lawyer. I take a little old man and legally prove to the world that he's Santa Claus. Now, you know that...
Oh, no, it can't be. It must have been left here by the people that moved out.
Maybe. Maybe I didn't do such a wonderful thing after all.
Fred thinks maybe he's not the greatest lawyer. Was the trial all part of Santa's plan? World-famous short summary. You can say there's no such thing as Santa, but for me and Grandpa, we believe. Hope you enjoyed today's show. I really appreciate you spending the time listening. You can find connections to social media and email on my site at snarkymoviereviews.com. There are links in the podcast show notes as well. Remember, the show is completely free and independent. All I ask is that you jump over to Apple Podcasts and give me a review. It really helps the show get found. I'm going to take a little holiday vacation, and I hope you enjoy your holidays as well. I'll see you back around January 9th. Beware the Moors.